And Marian?" Izz lowered her voice. "Marian drinks." "Indeed?" "Yes. The dairyman has got rid of her." "And you?" "I don't drink, and I bain't in a decline, but I'm no great things at singing afore breakfast now." "How is that? Do you remember how neatly you used to turn 'Twas down in Cupid's Gardens and The Tailor's Breeches at morning milking?" "Ah, yes. When you first came, sir, that was. Not when you had been there a bit." "Why was that falling off?" Her black eyes flashed up to his face for one moment by way of answer. "Izz, how weak of you, for such as I," he said, and fell into reverie. "Then suppose I had asked you to marry me?" "If you had, I should have said yes, and you would have married a woman who loved 'ee." "Really?" "Down to the ground," she whispered vehemently. "Oh, my God, did you never guess it till now?" By and by they reached a branch road to a village. "I must get down. I live out there," said Izz abruptly, having never spoken since her avowal. Clare slowed the horse. He was incensed against his fate, bitterly disposed towards social ordinances, for they had cooped him up in a corner out of which there was no legitimate pathway. Why not be revenged on society by shaping his future domesticities loosely, instead of kissing the pedagogic rod of convention in this ensnaring manner? "I'm going to Brazil alone, Izz," said he. "I have separated from my wife for personal, not voyaging reasons. I may never live with her again. I may not be able to love you, but will you go with me instead of her?" "You truly wish me to go?" "I do. I have been badly used enough to wish for relief, and you at least love me disinterestedly." "Yes, I will go," said Izz after a pause. "You will? You know what it means, Izz?" "It means that I shall live with you for the time you're over there. That's good enough for me." "Remember, you are not to trust me in morals now, but I ought to remind you that it will be wrong-doing in the eyes of civilization. Western civilization, that is to say." "I don't mind that. No woman do when it comes to agony point, and there's no other way." "Then don't get down, but sit where you are." He drove past the crossroads, 1 mile, 2 miles, without showing any signs of affection. "You love me very, very much, Izz?" he suddenly asked. "I do. I've said I do. I loved you all the time we was at the dairy together." "More than Tess?" She shook her head. "No," she murmured, "not more than she." "How's that?" "Because nobody could love 'ee more than Tess did. She would have laid down her life for 'ee. I could do no more." Like the prophet on top of Peor, Izz Huett would fain have spoken perversely at such a moment, but the fascination exercised over her rougher nature by Tess's character compelled her to grace. Clare was silent. His heart had risen at these straightforward words from such an unexpected, unimpeachable quarter. In his throat was something as if a sob had solidified there. His ears repeated, "She would have laid down her life for 'ee. I could do no more." "Forget our idle talk, Izz," he said, turning the horse's head suddenly. "I don't know what I've been saying. I will drive you back to where your lane branches off." "So much for honesty towards 'ee. Oh, how can I bear it? How can I? How can I?" Izz Huett burst into tears and beat her forehead as she saw what she had done. "Do you regret that poor little act of justice to an absent one? Oh, Izz, don't spoil it by regret." She stilled herself by degrees. Very well, sir. Perhaps I didn't know what I was saying either. What, when I agreed to go, I wish, what cannot be. Because I have a loving wife already. Yes, yes, you have. They reached the corner of the lane which they had passed half an hour earlier, and she hopped down. Please, please forgive my momentary levity, he cried. It was so ill-considered, so ill-advised. Forget it? Never, never. Oh, it was no levity to me. He felt how richly he deserved the reproach that the wounded cry conveyed, and, in a sorrow that was inexpressible, leapt down and took her hand. Well, but we'll part friends anyhow. You don't know what I've had to bear. She was a really generous girl, and allowed no further bitterness to mar their adieu. I forgive 'ee, sir, she said. Now, he said, while she stood beside him there, forcing himself to the mentor's part he was far from feeling. I want you to tell Marian when you see her that she is to be a good woman and not to give way to folly. Promise that. And tell Retty that there are more worthy men than I in the world, that for my sake she is to act wisely and well. Remember the words, wisely and well, for my sake. I send this message to them as a dying man to the dying, for I shall never see them again. And you, Izzy, you have saved me by your honest words about my wife from an incredible impulse towards folly and treachery. Women may be bad, but they are not so bad as men in these things. On that one account I can never forget you. Be always the good and sincere girl you've hitherto been, and think of me as a worthless lover, but a faithful friend. Promise. She gave the promise. Heaven bless and keep you, sir. Goodbye. He drove on, and no sooner had Izz turned into the lane and Clare was out of sight than she flung herself down on the bank in a fit of raking anguish, and it was with a strained, unnatural face that she entered her mother's cottage late that night. No one ever was told how Izz spent the dark hours that intervened between Angel Clare's parting from her and her arrival home. Clare, too, after bidding the girl farewell, was wrought to aching thoughts and quivering lips, but his sorrow was not for Izz. That evening he was within a featherweight's turn of abandoning his road to the nearest station and driving across that elevated dorsal line of South Wessex which divided him from Tess's home. It was neither a contempt for her nature nor the probable state of her heart which deterred him. No, it was a sense that, despite her love, as corroborated by Izz's admission, the facts had not changed. If he was right at first, he was right now, and the momentum of the course on which he had embarked tended to keep him going in it, unless diverted by a stronger, more sustained force than had played upon him this afternoon. He could soon come back to her. He took the train that night for London, and 5 days after shook hands in farewell of his brothers at the port of embarkation. End of chapter 40.